This is the best audio system that anyone has ever done in any car. I know it for sure. And there's two of them.
How long did the project take?
Almost 2 years. 10,000 hours. My name is Matt Figliola, and I'm the owner and founder of AI Design. AI Design is an automotive customization studio in the New York metro area. I'm more comfortable with more complexity than with less. I prefer the work to be complex. I don't like it when it's simple. Our craft is tailoring a vehicle to its owner, and we do it like no one else. I think I started in my basement, my dad's house, you know. My brother and I both, we were sort of like a team. We started with like model airplanes, which my father had a real sort of affinity for, like World War II airplanes. You know, when we finished, it looked like the picture on the box. I mean, it looked perfect, you know. But all the while we were in the basement with our tools and solitarily there, just in that moment and really focusing on these little tiny parts. That never left. I had a good friend in high school, John, and you know, he was the first of our group to get a car. And John was immediately wanted to mess around with it, fix it and whatever. We put some speakers into his car and I was just totally enamored by, you know, the effect that that had and the change that it was. And I was pretty sure that that's what I wanted to do. You know, my parents wanted me to go to college, but I really wanted to do that. And I did open my own place, and you know, this is what it's become. You know, fast forwarding to where I am now, I mean, I think that a lot of what I learned in the basement with my brother and I and my dad has shaped so much of how this business is today. Because I think one thing that AI Design does so well is we're really good at handling really small stuff. When the scale comes in and really shrinks and the parts get really small, particularly like on an interior or some detail on the body, capturing the right scale of that and fabricating at that scale is something we excel at. This is the side of the shop where we keep most of the long-term projects. We want to be close to our fabrication tools. And so you know, most of these cars and vehicles here will stay here for weeks on end, months on end, until they're done. So this is really the production side of the shop, you know, where a lot of cars come in and out of all day long. There's a lot of movement here. Most of the staff is working on this side of the shop. There's more activity, it's a little more frenetic. It's a matter of scale. The scale on this side is just smaller. The two sides are equipped differently, arranged differently, and considered differently by everyone here. In the beginning, yeah, I was just doing a lot of electronics work, but that changed rapidly, you know, because that wasn't enough. Once you start making things from scratch with your own hands, you don't see why you can't do that across the whole subject, you know, of cars. Once you look at how the manufacturer makes parts and how other people have made parts, that really became what I was so interested in, which was to actually make these parts and make them look like they belonged there, and to hide and camouflage the work that I was doing so that it took on the face of the car itself and not some sort of freestyle, you know, indulgence that I was trying to put out there, which is not what I wanted. To me, the joy was to hide it and to add all of this complexity and effect, but yet not make the car look like it changed very much or at all. And that's been my mantra for forever. You start to sort of get this real sort of sense of materials and developing your own sort of palette of materials. before you know it, you have this really wide range of material that you're working with. And that diversity, I think, is really why we're so successful, because we have so much at our disposal and so much experience, so much material, so many tools, and it gives us an ability set that I don't know any shops that have it like we do. They just don't. This is the leather splitter. It's a German machine. It's really made for like the shoemaker's trade, but we use it here to, cover really intricate parts of a car, interior. And it was the first machine I bought when I went into business 25 years ago. I guess I bought it because I always wanted it. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and I thought it would give me an edge, and it certainly did. If you were to upholster a shift knob and the boot that comes down from that shift knob, you would really want that leather to be really thin. And this is sort of how thick leather usually is for us, like automotive grade. It's like, 2 millimeters thick. And then when it comes out, this is about a third of what it was. I could go thinner, almost like tissue paper. But, it has this quality of being able to really form around something and have details pop out. It's just something you can't do with normal leather. This is a similar machine. This is called a skiver. It's got this great quality where you can literally miter the edge of the leather, where you're splitting it really thin so it has a knife edge. Some people might be familiar with like a Momo steering wheel, where the spoke is covered in leather and it connects to the outer ring, and that leather just drops off and you don't see the edge of the leather anymore. That edge has been skived, and the leather just falls away and there's no more edge to it, and it just sort of blends into the ring of the steering wheel. They use this machine to do that. This is part of every project. We use the 3D printing and what comes out of that machine for nearly everything that we work on. So that's a rear view mirror. That's going to be a final product. It also takes a long time to print. Sometimes it'll go 2-3 days nonstop, one part, so it might take 60 hours. So this is the wood and plastic shop, and this is a particularly vital tool in all that we do here. Sure, we make parts out of wood that go into cars, but we use it more times than that for making templates or jigs or fixtures to hold things. We make a lot of different templates and so forth that we save, stuff that we know that we'll use a second, third, fourth time. But we have all sorts of tools in here. We've got a really good table saw. This one actually has the equivalent of ABS brakes on it. If it detects flesh on the saw blade, the blade abruptly goes inside the machine and dead stops. This is interesting because we've done a few harness bars and roll cages in some Ferraris, and each time we do it, they're all slightly different depending upon the height of the driver and how he sits. But that one there, it just specs out the main hoop and the radiuses that you have to bend and where they're going to get placed. Up here, there's various template sets. Like you can see a bunch of templates grouped together. And those are all sorts of various center consoles that we've made for cars before in the past. And we could just duplicate those again. People often remark about how different each project is here. And they're often curious how, you approach each one. But I think for me, I don't see a big difference between this RV and this 911 and this Ferrari. Yes, there's huge differences in what's going to take place with them, but there's not a huge difference in my process. It's really the same process. It's getting to know what the client's after and sort of developing an idea, and then sort of me developing a physical plan or strategy to take all that to the finish line. So it's all the same tools, it's all the same gifted folks that work for me doing the same actions that they're used to doing all the time. I wouldn't take any more care or less care in the Ferrari than I would with this. The care is so extreme that it fits the needs of all these different cars that we work on. My goal has always been I'd like to do much larger projects, more significant projects. One very notable project is E45, which is really two vehicles, two Cadillac Escalades, model year 2015, that were built for one client to be used, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast, built identically to the same spec. They both are really exquisitely appointed limousine conversions, but that's really junior to the more senior aspect of them, which is this incredible audio system that has never been attempted before anywhere. It's nothing that can be compared to anything that's been done. Cost was of no concern. The budget was not discussed, and there literally wasn't anything spared expense-wise. The client gave us great freedom to really do whatever it was we needed to do to get the goal met, which was just to get this incredible system just the way he wanted it. We went back and forth on this quite a few times with a bunch of revisions, and we got to a point where he was happy with, you know, this type of speaker and this type of amplification. So when the new Escalades came out, you know, we were tasked with sort of taking what we learned and putting it into these new cars, which were very different than the old ones. So we had to sort of invent new things to accomplish that. You know, this is broken down into sections. Like, this is the source and control over here. So, and his network. You know, there's a sophisticated wireless network in the car, which can speak back to his home-based IT department. He has 6 terabytes of high-res music on board, which can sync up with his library at home. So as he adds music to car or home, the two parts sync together. So to do that, there's a very sophisticated modem that has this incredible bandwidth. It's actually a VPN. It's not even a modem anymore. It's a virtual private network. You want to have a device that can take 4 different data plans. To have really good sort of uninterrupted service, you'd want to take a plan from Verizon, from T-Mobile, from AT&T, from Sprint. You'd get all 4, right? And you would what they call bond them together. By having these different carriers, no matter where you are, for the most part, you will sort of benefit from one carrier's geographical advantage. He prefers to listen to most of his music content from Spotify. And Spotify has a fairly new feature called Spotify Connect. And Spotify Connect basically allows you to control your music selection from your device at the same time as the actual music file coming from another device. We don't want the music to come from your iPhone, because there's going to be a degradation in signal from that. We want the actual music signal to come straight off the WAN, and we want it to go directly into our really seriously high-end media controller that's in this. And at the time, there was only one real company that had a super duper high-end sort of, you know, high fidelity part to do that with. And that's why we chose this yellow box right here, which is a company called Name out of the UK. And it, you know, the proof is in the pudding. It really works. I think the biggest challenge of the whole car was the doors. The doors themselves house the most important speakers in the system. It was probably, I estimate it was 60% of the job to do all 8 doors on the 2 trucks that we worked on. You know, we had to cut the whole inside of the door out. We had to fabricate a tubular aluminum frame to make the door more rigid. To get the most out of any speaker, no matter what we're talking about, You don't want anything the speaker's mounted to move. Any vibration counteracts the vibration of the speaker itself. It actually cancels each other out. So if you can make the mount for the speaker infinitely rigid, you would get the best result out of that speaker. So that's sort of the goal. Because when you do that, if you just can get that one physical challenge out of the way, you've just made everything sound better by a factor of 10. Doesn't matter what you have, you can put the worst speaker in there and it'll sound 50 times better than it ever could. But then it had to be trimmed to look like a Cadillac door, which was really, really hard. 70% of the rear doors were 3D printed parts, and probably 40% of the front doors were 3D printed parts. I mean, it just took a long, long time. But, you know, we pulled it off. To meet my standard every day is hard. It's really hard. Even for me, it's hard. I just can't drop it, you know? I can't drop the standard. The standard can only go up. It can never be static, and it can't go down. So I believe that's true in life of everything. There are no statics in life. Something's either growing or it's dying. And in this case, my standard is always going up. So it's harder and harder every year to make it happen, you know what I mean? So there is like a dichotomy of being in love with this place and hate with it, you know what I mean? I think that's true of a lot of people in a lot of professions, but it's really hard.